Hello everybody. In this video we'll explore how to do timing of our code in a cross-platform way, and we'll see some pitfalls that can happen and how to avoid them. So, say we measure things in seconds, or we think about time in seconds, but our computers think in some other measure of time, unit of time that's much smaller. Different platforms can call it differently. For this purpose we'll just call it ticks, which means whatever the platform measures time in, what the unit of time. In this, for illustration purposes, we'll say it's 10. It's completely unrealistic. It's just for illustration purposes. We'll see more realistic examples as we go along. Okay, so say we have so it's going to be a platform-specific definition. So this is going to be changing between platforms. So there's usually going to be some way that we can ask the platform what its rate is and how it measures time. So for this example, it's going to be 10. So 10 ticks per second, right? We can invert that, take the reciprocal, and get how many seconds are in a single tick, and it's obviously going to be some fraction of a second. So we can do that, and it's going to be 1/10, which is 0.1. So say we have some code, and this is going to be pseudocode. Doesn't matter which programming language you're using. Usually what we do, we measure how many ticks there are before and how many ticks after, and we use whatever platform specific way we get from the platform. We can have some abstraction layer over that, and that's going to be just the amount of ticks. So we're going to get the delta, which is the whatever the measure is after minus whatever it is before. That's how many ticks in integer values, how many whole ticks has passed between the start of our code that we're measuring to the end. So if we want to convert it to seconds, and we already stored the ticks per second beforehand, then we can just take, hey, here's how many ticks this took, divide that by how many ticks there are in a second, and it'll give us how many seconds, and it's usually going to be some fraction. Let's see how that looks. Oh, sorry, and we can also do the same thing. We can just multiply by the seconds per tick, right? Instead of dividing by ticks per second, it does exactly the same thing, and let's actually illustrate that. So say our delta ticks is 7, so whatever we're using, whatever our code is, it took 7 ticks. So we have the ticks per second, which is 10, so we divide 7 by 10, and that's going to give us some fraction, which is 0.7. Alternatively, we can take the measure of seconds per tick, which is some tiny fraction, and we're just going to multiply it 7 times, because that's how many delta ticks we had, and we're going to get the same value in terms of a fraction of a second. Okay, let's see some more realistic example. So say we have ticks per second, and that is 1,000,000. That's not actually very good. It's usually like 1 billion or something like that, but let's go with 1,000,000. So our SPT is going to be 1 over that, which is going to be 1 millionth, so it's a microsecond. And we have our motivating example code, and we get our delta ticks, and we can get a delta second by doing this, just multiply by our SPT that we've pre-calculated before once. Okay, so let's say before we had 5 and after we had 8 ticks, and so we took 3 and we multiplied that 3 by our microsecond, and we have 3 microseconds, right? So we have some fraction of a second that ends up being 3 microseconds. Now, let's say we actually want full numbers to represent time, and let's say we want specifically some fractions of a second, like microsecond or millisecond. So a millisecond is going to be whatever our delta second is times 1,000, because that's how many milliseconds there are in a second. And after that, if we want like microsecond, it's going to be 1,000,000 of that, right? But delta milliseconds is going to be delta ticks times 1,000 SPTs, and delta microsecond is going to be 1,000,000 SPT. But notice that we kind of have had to already know that to go from delta seconds to delta microseconds in whatever fraction we end up getting, we have to multiply by 1,000,000. So what we actually really want, if we look at that thing at the bottom, we want it's like a constant. So what we actually really want is some fraction, which is how many milliseconds per tick that is relevant to our current platform. And we want to do it in a cross-platform way. So whatever measures we're getting, we know that as long as we take how many ticks we got from the same platform as we're getting the milli SPT and micro SPT, then this is going to work and get us delta millisecond and delta microseconds. So this is how we're going to do it. We're taking the platform ticks per second, we're just storing that, and that's some number of ticks per second. It's going to be like 1,000,000 or 1,000,000,000, we don't know. But however much it is, we know that if we divide that by 1,000, we get how many there are in 1,000 of a second. So that's how many ticks there are per millisecond, and this could be an integer. Doesn't have to be a floating point. And the same thing, if we get this integer, we just divide it by 1,000,000, we know that whatever that number is how many ticks there are in a microsecond, sorry. So to get how many milliseconds there are in a single tick, we just take the reciprocal of each of those, right? And if we substitute that and then we simplify, we get this, right? We just flip the order, and this is our formula. So our milliseconds per tick, the fraction is 1,000 divided by the ticks per second. It may not be very intuitive to look at this formula as it is, but you saw how we got it. So now anytime we get some delta ticks by just using the platform get ticks before and after, we know that we can always just multiply it by the milli SPT, and then we get how many milliseconds have passed, or by the micro SPT, and we get how many microseconds have passed. So in our motivating example, that's how it's going to look. And that's it. That's how we do it in a cross-platform way. That's it. Thank you. If you like the video, you can hit the like button, and if you want to be notified about more videos like that, you can subscribe. See you in the next video.